My name is Dave, 32 years old, and I never thought I would walk out on my own family dinner. For years I had been the reliable one, the successful son who always picked up the tab. That night when my sister Amanda called me just the wallet, and everyone laughed while ordering lobster and premium whiskey, something inside me finally snapped. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family take advantage of your generosity. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in suburban Massachusetts where my parents worked hard but always seemed to struggle financially. My dad was a high school teacher, and my mom worked part-time at a local bakery. They were good people who taught us strong values, but money was always tight. Christmas meant one main gift and a stocking of necessities. Vacations were camping trips in state parks rather than flights to tropical destinations. We weren't poor, but we definitely had to watch every dollar. From an early age, I developed a different relationship with money than my siblings. While Amanda and Ryan spent their allowances immediately on candy and comics, I saved mine for weeks to buy a refurbished computer. I started mowing lawns at 12 and stocking grocery shelves at 16. My parents praised my work ethic, but never expected the same from my siblings. College was my turning point. I won a partial scholarship to study computer science at a state university, but still had to work 20 hours a week at the campus IT help desk to make ends meet. Those years were brutal, studying until 2 in the morning, then working before classes living on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. Meanwhile, Amanda attended a private liberal arts college, with my parents taking out second mortgages to cover her tuition. Ryan bounced between community colleges, never finishing a degree. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a software company in Boston. The starting salary wasn't amazing, but it was more than my parents had ever made combined. Within 3 years, I had paid off my student loans and started building savings. By 28, I was a senior developer making 6 figures with a nice apartment in the city and a reliable investment portfolio. That's when the requests started coming. First, it was Ryan needing $2,000 for rent after losing another job. Then Amanda wanted help with her credit card debt from a European vacation she deserved after working so hard. My parents' furnace broke during a brutal winter, costing $5,000 to replace. I covered it all, without hesitation. What started as emergency assistance soon became regular expectations. Amanda would call with a new crisis every few months: car repairs, security deposit for a new apartment, dental work, not covered by insurance. Ryan's requests were more frequent, but smaller. Just a few hundred here and there for utilities or groceries, always with promises to pay me back that never materialized. My parents never directly asked for money, but they would mention worries about retirement or home repairs in ways that made it clear they hoped I would offer. And I always did. I couldn't bear to see them struggle after they had given us everything they could. Last year, I received a substantial promotion to technical director with a 40% salary increase and a bonus structure. I mentioned it during a family dinner, feeling proud of my accomplishment. The congratulations lasted about 5 minutes before the conversation shifted to all the ways my new income could help everyone else. Amanda's eyes lit up as she talked about wanting to remodel her kitchen. Ryan immediately mentioned his dream of opening a food truck and needing startup capital. My parents exchanged glances, and later that week, called to ask if I might help them pay off their mortgage early. I became the family ATM, and with each withdrawal, I felt less like a son and brother, and more like a financial resource to be tapped. Birthday gifts from them became token gestures, a $10 gift card, or coffee mug, while my gifts were expected to be lavish. Thanksgiving at my place meant I bought all the food, drinks, and sent everyone home with leftovers. Christmas meant gifts for everyone, plus contributions to the family celebration. What hurt most wasn't the money. I could afford it. It was that no one seemed interested in my life beyond my paycheck. When I talked about work challenges, eyes glazed over. When I mentioned dating troubles, the subject quickly changed. But mention a bonus or investment that did well, and suddenly everyone was engaged in the conversation. I still loved my family deeply. I remembered Ryan teaching me to ride a bike, Amanda helping me with my first school dance, my parents sacrificing to give us the best they could. But those memories made the current reality even more painful. I had become a walking bank account in their eyes, and I didn't know how to change that perception without seeming selfish or cruel. The dinner that changed everything wasn't planned as a confrontation. It was simply the straw that broke my back after years of accumulated weight. My mother's 60th birthday was approaching, and I wanted to do something special for her. Despite the dysfunctional financial dynamics of our family, I truly loved my mom. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to make holidays special even when money was tight, the one who worked extra shifts to buy me that scientific calculator I needed for advanced math. I texted our family group chat. Would love to take everyone out for a nice dinner to celebrate Mom's birthday next Saturday. My treat. The responses came immediately. Amanda replied with a champagne emoji. Ryan asked, "Can I bring Melissa?" referring to his latest girlfriend. My father, always a man of few words, simply wrote, "Thanks, son." My mother was the only one who called me directly, genuinely touched by the gesture. "You don't have to do this, sweetheart," she said, her voice warm. "Just having everyone together would be gift enough." "I want to, Mom," I assured her. "You deserve to be celebrated." I made reservations at Whitfield's, one of the most acclaimed steakhouses in Boston. It wasn't just expensive, it was exclusive, requiring bookings weeks in advance. I had to call in a favor from a client who knew the owner to secure a Saturday night table for 6. The restaurant featured aged prime cuts, an award-winning wine list, and the kind of attentive service that anticipated needs before you expressed them. Dinner for 6 would easily run over $1,000, but this was for my mother's milestone birthday, and I wanted it to be memorable. The night of the dinner arrived, and I dressed appropriately in a tailored suit and polished Oxfords. When I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early, I was surprised to find my family already there, standing awkwardly in the elegant foyer. My father wore khakis and a golf polo, my mother in a simple blouse and slacks. Ryan had on jeans with worn sneakers, while Amanda sported leggings and an oversized sweater. Only Melissa, Ryan's girlfriend, who I was meeting for the first time, had dressed for the venue in a cocktail dress. The maitre d' gave their attire a subtle once-over, but maintained his professional demeanor as he led us to our table, a prime spot near the fireplace, with a view of the Boston skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The dining room exuded old-world luxury, with its mahogany paneling, crystal chandeliers, and white tablecloths so crisp they looked like fresh snow. "This is too much, Dave," my mother whispered as I held her chair. Her eyes shone with genuine gratitude, making me momentarily forget my reservations. "Nothing's too much for you, Mom," I replied, squeezing her shoulder gently. The conversation started pleasantly enough. We discussed my mother's plans to join a community garden, Ryan's latest job prospect at a marketing firm, and Amanda's recent promotion to assistant manager at her retail job. My father talked about his golf game improving since retirement. For 20 minutes it felt like the family gatherings I had always hoped for, supportive, interested, connected. The waiter approached with leather-bound menus and the extensive wine list. "Good evening, I'm Thomas, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with some water while you look over our offerings?" I noticed my family members' eyes widen slightly as they opened the menus and saw the prices. A brief silence fell over the table, a momentary acknowledgement of the expense. The appetizers started at $25, and entrees ranged from $45 to $120 for specialty cuts. Even side dishes were $15 each. "Perhaps we should just get a couple of appetizers to share," my mother suggested gently, always mindful of costs, even when she wasn't paying. "No, Mom, please order whatever you'd like," I encouraged. "This is your celebration. Everyone, please get what you want." I meant it sincerely. Despite everything, I wanted this to be a special night for my mother. I could afford it, and I truly wanted everyone to enjoy themselves. In that moment, I still believed this dinner could be different. A genuine celebration, rather than another opportunity for my family to take advantage. The wine steward approached next, offering expert guidance through their selection. I had planned to order a nice bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon to share something in the $100 range that would complement our meals without being extravagant. "Mom, what kind of wine would you like with dinner?" I asked. Before she could answer, Amanda jumped in. "Mom doesn't know wines. Let me handle this." She turned to the steward with a suddenly affected expertise. "We'll start with the Dom Perignon for the table, then moved to the Opus One with dinner. I kept my face neutral, but my stomach tightened. She had just ordered a $300 champagne and a $400 bottle of red. The wine steward looked to me for confirmation, and I nodded slightly. It was my mother's birthday after all. I could absorb the cost. What I couldn't anticipate was how that moment would set the tone for the evening ahead, one that would ultimately push me past my breaking point. As the waiter walked away to retrieve our champagne, Amanda leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile. "Well, you're just the wallet tonight, right, Dave?" she said with a laugh that others around the table joined except for my mother, who looked uncomfortable. I forced a polite smile while feeling the familiar sting of being reduced to my financial utility. "I'm happy to treat for Mom's birthday," I replied evenly, hoping to redirect the conversation. In that case, Ryan chimed in, turning to the waiter, who had just returned. "We'll take the seafood tower to start." He pointed to the largest appetizer platter on the menu. $140 of lobster, crab, oysters, and shrimp. "And the Wagyu beef carpaccio," Amanda added without consulting anyone. "Oh, and the foie gras." Within minutes, they had ordered 3 appetizers, totaling over $200. No one asked what I might want to try, or even what the birthday girl herself might prefer. My father sat quietly, occasionally glancing at me with what might have been apologetic eyes, but he said nothing to temper my siblings' enthusiasm. The Dom Perignon arrived with a ceremonial presentation. The steward showed the label, popped the cork with expert precision, and poured a taste for me to approve. I nodded, and he filled everyone's flutes. Ryan immediately drained his and held it out for a refill, before the steward had even finished serving my mother. "To Mom," I said, raising my glass. At least this toast brought a genuine moment of connection as we all clinked glasses, and my mother blushed with pleasure. The moment was short-lived. Amanda pulled out her phone and said, "Ryan, text Cody and tell him to join us. Dave's got this." I nearly choked on my champagne. "Who's Cody?" "My friend from work," Amanda replied casually. "He's in the area and hasn't had dinner yet." Before I could respond, Ryan was already typing on his phone. "Great idea. I told Melissa's roommate to come too. She's been wanting to try this place." Just like that, my reservation for 6 was becoming 8 without anyone consulting me. The restaurant had a strict policy about changing party sizes for prime weekend slots, and I would likely be charged a fee for the adjustment. More importantly, I hadn't budgeted for 2 additional guests I didn't even know. "Guys, this was supposed to be a family dinner for Mom's birthday," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Oh, don't be stingy," Amanda dismissed with a wave. "It's just 2 more people. You can afford it with that big promotion you got." There it was again, the presumption that my income was community property. I felt my jaw tighten, but said nothing as the appetizers began arriving. The seafood tower was admittedly impressive, a 3-tiered display of ice and shellfish. Amanda immediately stood to take photos for her Instagram, posing with her champagne flute beside the tower. 10 minutes later, I saw her post. "When your brother is loaded, blessed free meal," with a picture of the appetizers and champagne. She hadn't even mentioned it was our mother's birthday celebration. 7 people had already commented with variations of, "Lucky you." As we finished the appetizers, the waiter returned for our entree orders. My mother selected a reasonably priced filet mignon. My father chose the New York strip. Then Ryan ordered the tomahawk, a $120 specialty cut. "And I'll have another bottle of the Opus One," he added. "We should take one home for later, too." The waiter looked to me uncertainly. "Sir, would you like to order a bottle to go as well?" Before I could answer, Ryan said, "Yeah, he would. Put it on his tab." Amanda's friend Cody arrived just then, a lanky guy in ripped jeans who nodded casually at me before sitting down and immediately ordering the lobster tail and the most expensive side dishes on the menu. Melissa's roommate Taylor showed up minutes later, similarly underdressed, and proceeded to order the surf and turf special without so much as a thank you. By this point, we had consumed nearly $800 in food and drink, and the main courses hadn't even arrived. My credit card would be approaching its limit at this rate, something I hadn't anticipated when planning what was supposed to be a special but reasonable family dinner. As the waiter left with our entree orders, the conversation shifted to my recent promotion. "So how much is this new position paying you?" Amanda asked bluntly. I'd rather not discuss specific numbers. I replied, uncomfortable with the direction. Oh, come on, Ryan pressed. We're family. No secrets. Let's just say it was a substantial increase, I deflected. Well, I've been thinking about upgrading my car, Ryan continued, without missing a beat. The Audi Q5 would be perfect for me and Melissa. Probably around 50 grand for the options I want. And I desperately need a vacation, Amanda added. I'm thinking Bali for 2 weeks. After covering for my manager all year, I deserve it. They weren't even being subtle anymore. The hints had become direct solicitations right there at the dinner table in front of everyone. I felt my heart racing, palms growing sweaty around my water glass. The restaurant suddenly seemed too warm, too loud. Thomas the waiter caught my eye as he passed our table, giving me a knowing look I'd seen before. He'd witnessed this dynamic play out with other families, the successful child being bled dry by entitled relatives. There was sympathy in his glance, and perhaps a question, how much more would I tolerate? In that moment, clarity washed over me like cold water. This pattern would never end unless I ended it. No amount of generosity would satisfy the endless appetite my family had developed for my financial support. They would continue taking until there was nothing left, not just of my money, but of my self-respect. The final straw came when Amanda casually commented to the table at large. It's just money to Dave anyway. He makes so much he doesn't even notice when we spend it. I set down my water glass carefully. No problem, I said, with a calmness that surprised even me. Would you excuse me for a moment? I need to make a quick call. No one paid much attention as I stood and walked toward the restaurant's entrance phone already in hand. The appetizers arrived in a procession of elegant platters. The seafood tower stood nearly 2 feet tall, ice glistening under the restaurant's chandeliers. Waiters placed the Wagyu carpaccio and foie gras on the table with choreographed precision. Rather than appreciating the presentation or thanking me, my family immediately reached for their phones. This lighting is perfect, Amanda said, adjusting her position to capture the seafood tower from the most flattering angle. She took at least 15 photos before selecting one for her Instagram, never once acknowledging that this display was meant to celebrate our mother. Ryan directed Melissa to pose with her champagne flute raised beside the tower. Make sure you tag the restaurant, he instructed. My followers will be so jealous. Even my father, normally reserved about technology, took out his phone to snap pictures of the spread. Only my mother seemed embarrassed by the photo session, giving me an apologetic glance across the table. Not one of them said thank you. Not one mentioned that this extravagant feast was courtesy of my credit card. It was simply expected, as though I were not a person at the table, but merely the funding source for their evening of indulgence. I watched silently as Amanda's Instagram post went live. When your brother is loaded, blessed free meal champagne life living large. She had cropped me out of the picture entirely. Within minutes, comments appeared. Oh my God, girl, living your best life, so jealous right now. Your brother is the real MVP. She showed her phone around the table, laughing at the responses and adding more hashtags. Ryan glanced at me and snickered. You're trending, bro. Or at least your wallet island. The champagne disappeared quickly, with Ryan pouring himself a third glass before my mother had finished her first. Without consulting anyone, he signaled the waiter for another round of drinks for the table. Let's get some cocktails too, he suggested. I want to try their 20-year scotch. Amanda's friend Cody, who had arrived minutes earlier and barely acknowledged my presence, immediately chimed in. I'll have the same and a martini to start. He hadn't even said hello to me, the person paying for his unexpected participation in what was supposed to be a family celebration. When the waiter approached for our entree orders, the feeding frenzy escalated. My mother, always considerate, chose a modestly priced filet mignon. My father selected the New York strip, glancing at me with what might have been embarrassment. Then Ryan pointed to the most expensive item on the menu. I'll have the tomahawk rare, he declared. The 40-ounce prime cut cost $120 alone. Melissa ordered the lobster tail with filet, while Taylor, her roommate, who had just arrived immediately, requested the Japanese A5 Wagyu without so much as making eye contact with me. And more champagne, Amanda told the waiter. Actually, let's switch to that Opus 1 Red with dinner. And we should take a bottle home for later, too. Dave won't mind, right, bro? The waiter looked to me for confirmation. His expression professional, but with a hint of concern. I nodded slightly, feeling a growing pressure in my chest that had nothing to do with the rich food. As appetizers were being cleared and we awaited our main courses, Amanda steered the conversation toward my finances with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. So Dave, that promotion must have come with a sweet raise. Huh? What are we talking? 6 figures. I shifted uncomfortably. I don't really want to discuss specific numbers. Oh, come on. Ryan pressed, leaning forward. We're family. How much are they paying you now? It was a substantial increase, I replied vaguely. Well, my car is basically falling apart. Ryan continued, ignoring my obvious discomfort. The Audi dealership has this Q5 that would be perfect. Only about 50 grand for the package I want. He wasn't even pretending anymore. This wasn't a hint. It was a direct solicitation at a dinner I was already paying for. Amanda took her cue. I've been killing myself at work covering for my useless manager. I deserve a real vacation. I'm thinking Bali for 2 weeks. The resort I want is only $300 a night. My hands began to tremble slightly. I set down my water glass to hide the reaction. The restaurant suddenly felt airless, the ambient noise of clinking glasses and conversation fading to a distant hum. I could feel my pulse in my temples, a steady drumbeat of anger and hurt. Thomas, our waiter, passed by with a tray for another table and caught my eye. His glance held a mix of professional neutrality and personal sympathy. I'd seen that look before, from servers, bartenders, and valets who had witnessed this same dynamic play out. The successful family member surrounded by relatives who saw them as nothing more than an ATM. Watching Amanda show Taylor photos of the Bali resort on her phone, hearing Ryan discuss Audi options, with Cody seeing my father's uncomfortable silence and my mother's growing distress, something crystallized within me. This pattern would never end unless I ended it. The requests would never stop, the entitlement would never diminish, and my role as family financier would never evolve back into being simply a son and brother. I recalled all the times I'd covered Ryan's rent after he spent his paycheck on gaming equipment. The countless emergencies Amanda had that somehow always coincided with designer sales. The home repairs for my parents that mysteriously expanded in scope once I agreed to pay. The pattern was clear, consistent, and crushing. The final straw came as Amanda refilled everyone's wine glasses from our second bottle of Opus 1, casually remarking to the table, "It's just money to Dave anyway. He makes so much he doesn't even notice when we spend it." The table laughed, except for my mother, who looked down at her plate. That comment, reducing not just my generosity, but my very identity to a financial resource, cut through the last thread of my patience. I set down my napkin with deliberate calmness. "No problem," I said quietly, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "Would you excuse me for a moment? I need to make a quick call." No one paid much attention, as I stood and walked toward the restaurant's entrance phone already in hand. They were too busy discussing which desserts to order, all of them most likely. In the quiet foyer of the restaurant, I called my credit card company. "Hello, this is Dave Mitchell. I need to remove a payment authorization." I began, my voice low, but determined. "I'm currently at Whitfield's restaurant in Boston, and I've been informed that several unauthorized guests have been added to my party ordering items without my consent." The representative was efficient and understanding. "We can place a hold on any further charges from this establishment tonight, Mr. Mitchell. Would you like us to dispute the existing charges as well?" I considered this. "Number, I'll honor what's been ordered so far, but nothing additional. And please flag any attempts to add gratuity over 20%. After completing the call, I stood in the restaurant's foyer for a long moment, gathering my resolve. The path ahead was clear, though not easy. Instead of returning to the table, I approached the host's stand. "Excuse me," I said to the maitre d'. "I need to leave unexpectedly, but my family will remain. I've arranged payment for what's been ordered so far, but nothing additional. Could you please inform our server, Thomas?" The maitre d' nodded professionally, though his eyes registered understanding. "Of course, sir. Would you like me to communicate anything to your party?" No need, I replied already, composing a text message. I'll handle that part myself. Thank you. Outside on the sidewalk, breathing in the cool evening air, I sent a message to our family group chat. Something came up that I need to handle immediately. I've paid for everything ordered so far. Anything additional will be your responsibility. Happy birthday, Mom. I'm sorry. Then I turned off notifications, got into my car, and drove home in silence, feeling both terrified and liberated by what I had just done. I stepped outside into the cool Boston evening, inhaling deeply, as the restaurant door closed behind me. The contrast between the stuffy atmosphere inside and the fresh air on the street matched the sudden relief I felt. For a moment I stood motionless on the sidewalk, half expecting someone to come running after me. No one did. The valet approached, but I waved him off and walked to the public parking garage 2 blocks away where I'd left my car. Each step felt lighter than the last, as though I were shedding years of accumulated resentment with every foot forward. In the privacy of my car, I sent a text to our family group chat. Something came up that I need to handle immediately. I've paid for everything ordered so far. Anything additional will be your responsibility. Happy birthday, Mom. I'm sorry. Then I turned off notifications, started the engine, and pulled onto the street. The digital clock on my dashboard read 8:37. They would be receiving their main courses right about now, perhaps still unaware that their financial safety net had just been withdrawn. The 15-minute drive to my apartment passed in a blur of streetlights and scattered thoughts. Part of me felt crushing guilt. I had just walked out on my mother's birthday dinner. Another part felt exhilarated. I had finally stood up for myself after years of quiet compliance. Mostly I felt numb, as though I were watching someone else's life unfold from a distance. When I reached my building, I checked my phone out of habit. 37 missed calls, 22 text messages. I scrolled through them quickly. Amanda, what the fuck? Dave, where are you? Ryan, dude, the waiter says your card won't work. Amanda, call me now. Ryan, this isn't funny. Man, Dad, son, please call us. Mom, David, are you okay? We're worried. Amanda, I can't believe you would embarrass us like this. Ryan, you're dead to me. The messages grew increasingly frantic and angry. I switched to our family group chat to see the full conversation. Amanda, guys, Dave's card isn't working, Ryan. What do you mean it's not working, Amanda? The waiter said it's been declined for the rest of the meal. Dad, did anyone try calling him, Amanda? He's not answering? Ryan, this is BS. Amanda, Mom is crying. Ryan, we don't have enough cash for this bill. Amanda, Taylor, and Cody are freaking out. Ryan, the manager is coming over. Dad, I'm putting it on my card. Amanda, Dad, your card has a limit, Ryan. I can do 2. Huna. Max. Amanda, this bill is over $1,700. Ryan, $1,700. I stopped reading and turned off my phone completely. Entering my apartment, I slumped onto the couch in the darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. For the first time in years, I felt completely unburdened by family obligations. The sensation was foreign, almost disorienting in its unfamiliarity. Sleep eluded me that night. I alternated between justifying my actions and condemning myself for them. By morning, I had decided to face whatever consequences came my way. I turned my phone back on and was immediately bombarded with notifications. 53 missed calls, 41 text messages, 6 voicemails. The most recent text was from my father, sent at 2:15 in the morning. We managed to cover the bill. Your mother and I put it on our credit card. Ryan and Amanda contributed what they could. We'll discuss this when you're ready to talk. I listened to the voicemails next. Amanda's voice shrill with rage. I have never been so humiliated in my entire life. The manager made us pool all our money together like we were criminals. Taylor and Cody will never speak to me again. You are the most selfish person I've ever known. Ryan's message was shorter, but equally vitriolic. If you think you're ever getting another minute of my time, you're delusional. We're done. My father sounded tired. Call us when you can, son. We need to talk about what happened. My mother's voice was the hardest to hear, thick with tears. David, sweetheart, I don't know what happened tonight, but I'm worried about you. Please let us know you're safe. Whatever it is, we can work it out. The final voicemail was from Amanda. Again left at 1:30 in the morning. You know what, Dave, I always knew. You were a stuck-up jerk. Just because you make good money doesn't mean you're better than us. Good luck having any family after this stunt. I closed my eyes and let the wave of guilt wash over me. I had ruined my mother's birthday. I had humiliated my family in public. I had acted impulsively and perhaps cruelly. And yet a quiet voice inside reminded me that they had taken advantage of my generosity for years. They had invited strangers to a family dinner without consulting me. They had mocked me openly, reduced me to my financial utility, and shown no gratitude for my contributions. The next 2 weeks passed in an uneasy silence. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and taking on additional projects to avoid the emptiness of my apartment and the absence of family calls that had once filled my evenings. I declined invitations from colleagues, unsure how to explain my subdued mood. On the 16th day after the dinner incident, my phone rang with my mother's number. I almost didn't answer, but found myself accepting the call at the last moment. Hello. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. David. My mother's voice was cautious, as though approaching a wild animal. How are you, sweetheart? I'm okay, Mom. The familiar term of endearment nearly broke me. How are you? We've been worried about you. She paused. Your father and I would like to see you. Maybe coffee somewhere. Just the three of us. The significance of just the three of us wasn't lost on me. No Amanda, no Ryan. A conversation without the most volatile elements. Okay, I agreed. When? We arranged to meet the following Sunday at a quiet cafe halfway between my apartment and their house. The week until then crawled by my anxiety building with each passing day. When Sunday arrived, I found them already seated at a corner table, my father's posture stiff, my mother's eyes lighting up when she spotted me. The conversation started awkwardly with weather and work as safe topics. Eventually my father cleared his throat. About what happened at the restaurant, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. We owe you an apology. Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this wasn't one of them. I stared at him in surprise. Your mother and I have been talking, he continued. We've enabled a lot of bad behavior over the years. Not just from Amanda and Ryan, but from ourselves too. We've allowed you to become the family safety net, without considering what that might feel like for you. My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. We should have stepped in that night when things got out of control. The comments, the extra guests, the excessive ordering, it wasn't right, and we sat there silently while it happened. The knot in my chest began to loosen slightly. I shouldn't have walked out like that, I admitted. Especially on your birthday, Mom. I'm sorry. I understand why you did, she replied softly. It had probably been building for a long time. For the next hour, we talked openly about the family dynamics that had led to that disastrous dinner. My parents acknowledged their role in creating an environment where my financial support was expected rather than appreciated. I admitted that I had enabled the situation by never setting boundaries. What about Amanda and Ryan? I finally asked. My father's expression darkened. They're still pretty angry. Amanda is refusing to discuss it. Ryan called once to ask if we'd heard from you, but when we suggested he might owe you an apology, he hung up. Give them time, my mother advised. This has been a wake-up call for all of us. Over the following months, a new family dynamic slowly emerged. My parents and I rebuilt our relationship on more equal footing. We had dinner once a month, always with clear expectations about payment. One I did. Sometimes they treated, sometimes I did. Sometimes we split the bill. Amanda maintained her silence for nearly 3 months before sending a terse text, I need to talk to you. We met at a coffee shop where she delivered a grudging apology that felt more like a negotiation to restore access to my financial support. When it became clear that my wallet was no longer available to her, she cut the conversation short and left. Ryan's girlfriend, Melissa, reached out to me independently, apologizing for their behavior at the dinner. Ryan's been struggling, she confided. He lost his job last month and finally realized he can't keep depending on everyone else to bail him out. He's too proud to call you, but he knows he messed up. 2 weeks later, Ryan texted, got a new job. Starting next week. Thought you should know. It wasn't an apology, but it was communication, and it came without a request for money. Progress, however small. Extended family took sides in the conflict. My Aunt Julia called to say she'd always thought Amanda and Ryan took advantage of me. My Uncle Peter suggested I was selfish for embarrassing the family. Cousins I rarely spoke with suddenly had strong opinions about my character and choices. Friends were universally supportive when I finally shared what had happened. My colleague Marcus admitted he'd been in a similar situation with his brothers. "You did what I've never had the courage to do," he told me. "Set a boundary and stick to it." Through it all, I found myself working with a therapist to navigate the complex emotions of guilt, relief, anger, and hope. Financial boundaries are still boundaries, she reminded me in our sessions. And healthy boundaries make healthy relationships possible. 6 months after the restaurant incident, I declined a request for money for the first time without guilt or explanation. My cousin needed just $2,000 for car repairs. I simply replied, "I'm not able to help with that. I hope you get it sorted out." The sky didn't fall. The family didn't disown me. The world continued turning on its axis. That night I slept more peacefully than I had in years, finally understanding that no was not just a complete sentence, but sometimes the most honest expression of self-respect. The weeks following the restaurant incident were some of the loneliest of my life. The constant stream of family texts, calls, and requests that had once filled my days suddenly ceased. My phone remained silent, except for work communications and the occasional message from friends unaware of the family schism. Amanda maintained radio silence for 21 days. Her Instagram continued to showcase an apparently carefree life. Brunches with friends, shopping trips, and workout selfies, but there was no direct communication with me. Ryan was slightly less disciplined in his silence, occasionally sending passive-aggressive texts. "Must be nice to have so much money you can just throw away family," or "Hope you're enjoying your fancy apartment all alone." My parents were the first to break the ice meaningfully. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon, her voice tentative, as she asked how I was doing. The conversation was stilted, but civil. My father got on the line, briefly clearing his throat several times, before simply saying, "We should talk in person sometime, son." That initial conversation led to our coffee meeting and the beginning of a slow reconciliation. But the wider family fallout was just beginning. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, called unexpectedly one evening. "I always knew those kids took advantage of you," she declared, without preamble. "Amanda's been doing it since college. Remember when she needed textbook money that somehow turned into a spring break trip to Cancun?" I was surprised by her support, but also uncomfortable with the family gossip element. "I appreciate your understanding, Aunt Patricia, but I'm trying to move forward positively." On the opposite end of the spectrum, my Uncle Robert, my father's brother, left a scathing voicemail. "You humiliated your family in public over a few $100s when you're making 6 figures. That's not how we raised you. Kids to behave. Family helps family, period." He conveniently overlooked that the bill had been over $1,700 and that helping family had become a one-way street in my case. Cousins I spoke with perhaps once a year at holidays suddenly had strong opinions about my character. Some sent supportive messages. Others made cutting remarks at family gatherings I no longer attended. My grandmother, the family matriarch at 87, summoned me to her assisted living facility for tea. I expected a lecture, but received wisdom instead. "You know," she said, stirring honey into her cup, "your grandfather and I had a rule. We helped with needs, not wants, and never without a conversation first." She patted my hand. "Boundaries aren't cruel, David. They're necessary." At work, I found unexpected support when I finally shared what had happened with a few close colleagues. Marcus, a senior developer who had mentored me for years, nodded in recognition as I described the restaurant scene. My brother expected me to fund his failed business ventures for nearly a decade, he confided. "Every family has someone who carries more than their share. You did what I've never had the courage to do. You put down the load." Surprisingly, my boss noticed the change in me before I mentioned anything. "You seem more focused lately," she commented during our weekly one-on-one. "More present." When I briefly explained the situation, she shared that she'd gone through something similar with a cousin who expected loans that were never repaid. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop enabling behaviors that harm both of you. The most unexpected support came from Thomas the waiter, from that fateful night at Whitfield's. I had returned to the restaurant alone for lunch, partly to ensure there were no lingering issues from the abrupt ending to our party's meal. He recognized me immediately. "Mr. Mitchell," he said, approaching my table with professional courtesy. "It's good to see you again. I wanted to apologize for any inconvenience that night," I began. He shook his head slightly. "No apology necessary. In 15 years of service, I've seen many similar situations." He lowered his voice. "What you did took courage. Most people just keep paying to avoid the conflict." Outside my immediate circle, I found myself becoming more discerning about all my relationships. I began to recognize patterns of one-sided giving in friendships I had maintained out of habit rather than genuine connection. Some of these I worked to balance. Others I allowed to naturally fade. I also started therapy initially to process the guilt I felt about the restaurant incident, but eventually to explore deeper patterns in my life. My therapist, Dr. Harriet Wilson, helped me see how my identity had become entangled with financial caretaking. "You've built your self-worth around being needed," she observed in our third session. "But being needed for your resources is different from being valued for yourself." We worked through exercises to help me distinguish between genuine generosity and compulsive giving motivated by fear of rejection. I learned to sit with the discomfort of saying no without immediately trying to soothe it by giving in. Amanda finally broke her silence 3 months after the incident. Her text was characteristically blunt. "I need to talk to you." We met at a coffee shop near her apartment. She looked thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes, partly concealed by makeup. So she began, after we'd sat with our drinks, "I've been thinking about what happened." I waited, determined not to fill the silence. "I might have been a little entitled about money stuff," she continued reluctantly, "and the comments at dinner were out of line." It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but, coming from Amanda, it was significant. "Thank you for acknowledging that," I replied carefully. "So we're good now, right?" she asked, brightening slightly. "Because I'm looking at apartments, and the security deposit for the one I really want is pretty steep." And there it was. The real purpose of the reconciliation attempt. Not to repair our relationship, but to regain access to my financial support. "Amanda," I said gently, "I'm happy to rebuild our relationship as brother and sister, but I'm not providing financial assistance anymore." Her expression hardened immediately. "Wow. You really have changed." She gathered her purse and stood. "When you decide to stop being selfish, let me know." She left without a backward glance, and we didn't speak again for another 2 months. Ryan's approach was different. His girlfriend Melissa reached out first, asking to meet for coffee. She arrived looking nervous, fidgeting with her cup as she spoke. "Ryan would kill me if he knew I was here," she began. "But I thought you should know he lost his job last month. It's been a wake-up call for him." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said sincerely. "The thing is," she continued, "he's actually handling it better than I expected. He's applying for positions every day, taking some online courses to improve his skills. He's even selling his gaming equipment to make rent." "That sounds like positive steps," I offered. "He talks about you, you know," she said quietly. "Not the angry stuff anymore. The other day he said, 'Dave was right. I've been letting everyone carry me for too long.'" 2 weeks later, I received a text from Ryan. "Got a new job, starting next week. Thought you should know." It wasn't an apology, but it was communication without a request attached, perhaps the first such message in our adult relationship. I replied, with simple congratulations, and we began a cautious text exchange every few weeks. My parents continued their own journey of recognition and change. My father, never comfortable with emotional discussions, showed his evolution through actions rather than words. When they invited me for dinner, he insisted on paying the check. "We can take care of our own expenses," he said firmly, "and sometimes yours too. That's how family should work, give and take." My mother was more verbally reflective. "We failed you by creating different expectations for you than for your siblings," she admitted during one of our conversations. "You were always so capable that we forgot. You needed support too, not just financially, but emotionally." 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, I received a call from a cousin asking for money to cover car repairs. In the past, I would have immediately transferred the funds, seeking the momentary warmth of being the family hero. Instead, I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm not able to help with that. I hope you get it sorted out." My hand trembled slightly as I ended the call, but the sky didn't fall. The family didn't disown me. Life continued, but with a new, healthier pattern forming. That night, lying in bed, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years. The constant weight of financial responsibility for multiple adults had been lifted from my shoulders. My bank account was healthier, but more importantly so was my sense of self-worth. I was learning slowly but surely that no was not just a complete sentence, but sometimes the most honest expression of self-respect. 6 months after the restaurant incident that changed everything, I found myself sitting on a park bench overlooking the Charles River, the Boston skyline reflected in the water, shimmering with the golden light of late afternoon. I was meeting my family for dinner later, all of them together for the first time since that fateful night. The past half-year had brought changes I never could have anticipated. Some painful, others surprisingly positive. All necessary. Amanda had experienced the most dramatic transformation. 3 weeks after our failed coffee shop reconciliation, she lost her assistant manager position due to company downsizing. For the first time in her adult life, she had no financial safety net to catch her. No Dave to call for rent money, no parents with available credit. She moved to a smaller apartment, took on a roommate, and found work at a local boutique, making less than her previous job. The adjustment was brutal, but ultimately transformative. When she finally reached out again, her tone had changed completely. "I owe you a real apology," she said when we met for lunch. Not the fake one I gave before. Her eyes free of the defensive anger I'd grown accustomed to seeing met mine directly. "I've been awful to you for years, treating you like an ATM instead of a brother. I'm truly sorry, Dave." I asked what had prompted this realization. "Reality," she replied with a wry smile. "When you have to count every dollar yourself, you start to understand what you've been taking for granted from others." She refused when I offered to pay for lunch. "I budgeted for this," she insisted. "It matters to me to do this myself." Ryan's journey had been quieter, but equally significant. His new job wasn't glamorous, entry-level marketing assistant at a small firm, but he approached it with unexpected diligence. He and Melissa moved to a more affordable apartment, adopted a strict budget, and began paying down their credit card debt. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told me during a Saturday morning coffee meetup that had become our new tradition, about respect being earned, not bought. "I want my future kids to respect me the way we all respected Dad growing up. Not because he gave us everything we wanted, but because he worked hard and stood for something." My parents had perhaps the most subtle but profound evolution. They stopped dropping hints about financial needs and started inviting me over simply to spend time together. My father called just to ask about my day. My mother sent texts with funny observations, rather than thinly veiled requests. When I brought wine to dinner, they actually drank it, instead of saving it for a special occasion as they once would have. My own changes were equally significant. Through therapy and self-reflection, I recognized how my self-worth had become unhealthily tied to financial caretaking. I learned to value my presence over my presence, my time over my wallet. I also met Catherine, an environmental lawyer who knew nothing about my family history when we started dating. When I finally shared the restaurant story, her response was refreshingly direct. "They treated you like a bank, not a person. Of course you walked out." Catherine valued experiences over possessions, preferred cooking together to expensive restaurants, and insisted on splitting costs equally from our first date. For our 3-month anniversary, she planned a weekend camping trip that cost less than one meal at Whitfield's but created memories I'll cherish forever. Most importantly, I learned to recognize the difference between genuine generosity and compensatory giving. True generosity comes from abundance, not obligation, from choice, not coercion, from love, not fear of rejection. As I sat on that park bench waiting for the time to meet my family, I reflected on how differently this dinner would unfold compared to the last. We had chosen a moderately priced Italian restaurant, where we had agreed to split the bill equally. No one had invited additional guests. No one had made assumptions about who would pay. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Looking forward to seeing you, sweetheart. Dad's excited to tell you about his volunteer work." This was the new normal. Connection based on genuine interest in each other's lives, rather than financial utility. When I arrived at the restaurant, my family was already seated at a round table near the window. Amanda waved enthusiastically, Ryan stood to greet me with a hug, and my parents beamed with genuine pleasure at my arrival. "We ordered a bottle of Chianti to share," my father announced. "Hope that works for everyone." "Perfect," I replied, taking my seat and noticing the simple pleasure of being welcomed for myself alone. Throughout dinner we talked about work projects, neighborhood news books we'd read, and shows we'd watched. Not once did the conversation turn to money loans or financial assistance. When the check came, my father reached for it, first calculated each person's share, and we all contributed accordingly. As we said our goodbyes outside the restaurant, my mother hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of the man you've become," she whispered. "Not because of what you achieve or earn, but because of who you are." Those words, validation of my character rather than my financial contributions, meant more than any thank you for a paid bill ever could. Walking back to my car, I realized that the most valuable currency in life isn't measured in dollars, but in authentic connection. The restaurant incident that once seemed like a family-destroying disaster had actually been the catalyst for rebuilding relationships on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial dependence. I had learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's essential for healthy relationships. That generosity freely given is beautiful, but generosity extracted through guilt or obligation breeds resentment. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set a boundary and hold it firmly. Most importantly, I learned that my worth was never in my wallet. It was in my heart all along. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the short term, but led to healthier relationships in the long run? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about setting boundaries and finding authentic connection. Thank you for listening, and remember, you're worth more than what you can give to others. Your presence is the real present.